Hello, everyone, and finally, I am beyond thrilled to represent Neil Milton just across the globe, Australia, who is today not only
Hello.
presenting Australia, but as well Child Safety as organization, which is non-profitable, which is something completely probably opposite to what we know as business owners who are striving for wealth and impact. But as I just chatted with Neil before the interview, that it is us, human to human, who is actually making the change in this world. So this is why I'm really happy to onboard Neil to this official CEO World Record attempt. So hi, Neil.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, I'm well. I'm very well. And I thought about the first question, which I wanted to ask you, and it's coming through me. So, what is what is the most maybe frequent advice people are seeking in you, and what type of answers or guidance you provide for them?
Yeah, I think probably one of the major things that I find is, how do we keep children safe in organisations? What is it that we can do to really keep children safe? I think there's still a sense of apathy in the community around child safety, and at ChildSafe Australia, we're about empowering organisations to keep children safe, and we provide the tools and services so they can comply with child safety standards that are around the world and in state based in Australia and those sort of things. But we also about creating a culture of child safety, and so I guess the major question people ask is, how do we actually do that? What does that practically look like, and what's the heart behind it?
I see. And I know that your position, you are general manager of this organization, right, Neil? And the question is like, why you made a choice to lead, to stand behind the wheel of this, of this profound, organization. And because I bet you have so many various, distinctive backgrounds and expertise, but you literally chose to do that. And as I understand, it's nearly 6 years while you are in this position, right?
That's right. Yeah, I've been in nearly 6 years. Look, I think I know it's a bit odd, I guess, in some ways. Is that like this job came up, and I was working for another company, and this job came up, and I thought, I'll just throw my hat in the ring and see if it works and stuff. And I remember, but uh, at 3 o'clock in the morning, about a year into my position here, I woke up crying, and I was reminded of my own story of being sexually abused as a child by another child, and I rang my wife, who gladly picked up,
Mm.
and we had a bit of a chat about the impact that it had on my life, and how this being a voice in this marketplace around child safety was something that I was really passionate about, and it really got to me in my heart, and it just made me really emotional. And I'm going through that journey as well. And I think one of your questions was what's a ritual that I do, and you know I think the thing for me is that because I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, I understand the pain of what it feels like when a child is abused, and I don't want any child to feel like that. And so I'm passionate about trying to make sure that a child doesn't feel like that. And as the leader of this organization, I want to make sure what we do is everything we can to protect them from that, because when a child is abused, it's a life sentence, and it can sometimes be a comma or a full stop, but it could be mental health concerns, a number of different things. The brain can stop working in some ways, or slow up when there's trauma involved, and so we don't want to see that. And so what I do is, from an advocacy perspective, is I try to help organizations to understand the why, rather than considering just focused on compliance, because we can really
Mm.
focus on compliance and that's it, and because it's what law says. But the reality is, why do we do it? We don't want to see a child abused. And so as a person that's passionate about this, it's connected to my story.
Oh, I love that. I feel that there can't be a better leader to lead this type of organization, but the one who, yeah, it's only when you experience that yourself, you can be the voice of the impact you are guys creating, and yeah, an advocate, and as you say, yeah, the why beneath the why, because I mean we can literally focus so much on all the technicalities and aspects and compliance and risk assessments, but at the end of the day, while we are focusing on that like bureaucracy, right, we uh,
Yeah.
the oneness is not, from our bodies to that impact and probably productivity as well. But
Mm.
where I want to go into and use this platform, it is for you to be that voice and teach us and give us the light of like what does it feel like to be abused as a child, and what type of traumas that brings into the future when we grow up and turn into adults and etc. Because I believe that there will be a lot of CEOs listening, and
Yeah.
we might not even know what is happening in the families of our people, or with my son. I have a son too. Could you do that for us, Neil?
Yeah. I mean, look, I've got 3 kids. Um, One of them's got a mild intellectual disability. And I don't want to see them abused, and I don't want to see anyone else's
Mm.
children abused. And I was abused when I was 10 years old, and and I didn't really realize it was abuse until I was 21 years old,
Wow.
and so I held on to that. And the reason being is because when I went to a trusted adult, I said, look, this is what's happening. It was a child as well, and that wasn't really a thing back then at all. And now there's, almost a third of, or even a half of all abuse is abused by another child. And so this child befriended me, um, and I don't even know how it went from playing, playing
Mm.
imaginary games to 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 the sexual abuse that occurred. But everything was done in secret, and I came to a trusted adult, and they said, "Oh." I said, is this a right? Like, is this what's happening? Is this what a friend is? I was 10 years old. I didn't have a friend before. And they said, oh, no, you're just experimenting.
Oh.
And what I didn't realize is what that did is because I trusted that person, they told me it was experimenting. I felt like I was fobbed off and I wasn't listened to. I didn't realize that experience, that impact actually set me on a trajectory to everything I did and everything I was about getting my voice heard, whether it be a job, a title, a position, a relationship, a whole bunch of different things. And I made some really bad decisions because of trying to get my voice heard. And it wasn't until about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm 44 years old, right? I know I look so young. Thanks very much. And 44 years old, and it was only about 3 or 4 years ago that I realized that my voice is valid no matter whether people hear it or not. Like, I am
Absolutely.
enough as I am. And what it helped me to understand is that I even realized that I don't even need to be in leadership in order to make a difference. I don't even need to be in leadership to really understand that and to be okay with who I am. And I think for me personally, what it feels like to be abused is a massive amount of shame. And I guarantee you there are a lot of CEOs walking around with a lot of shame from decisions that they've made or from the trauma that they've experienced as a child or even as an adult. And that could be not just sexual abuse, could be physical abuse, could be emotional, could be neglect, could be family violence. And the reality is trauma sits with you for life. And I'm not saying that you feel the impact all the time, because you learn to cope or grow. And some people make decisions to cover it up with alcohol or drugs or whatever it is, or religion or a whole bunch of different things. But what I have done in my life is surround myself with people that really care about who I am as a person and are willing to journey with me. And I think what I've learned as a child, when I was a child, is I didn't know it was abuse, so I didn't really feel like I was carrying around this. But I do remember when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, sorry, and the abuse had stopped. And I remember sitting in my house with an old style encyclopedia looking up the disease AIDS
Mm-hmm.
at 13 years old and thinking I have every single symptom
Oh,
and going, what do I do with that? At 13 years old with no one to talk to, how do I deal with that? And I had to navigate that and go, well, hang on a sec. I had to reason with myself that this is actually not that. So I think the impact to trauma, you don't fully understand because it's always different for every person. But I will say this, if we can stop kids from being abused, and we know in this world it's never going to happen completely. We know that because we can't impact people inside of their homes. But what we can do is we can create the environments in those organizations to keep those children safe. Then at least that's one space that they can feel like they can be who they are.
wow. Whew. I loved the vulnerability you shared with us, and I truly am so gratefully thankful. Because as you say, I believe, I mean, all of us, we carry through life so many traumas, and yeah, most of them we don't really realize, and at the same time, we keep, there are certain traumas which is easy to it's easy to ignore, it's easy to cover, because we kind of created it in a more, how I would say, in a more softer way, but the ones you experience and the ones other kids are experiencing is just, yeah, it's big traumas, or it's big events causing traumas. Where I want now to lead our conversation is, now if we speak about the leader who is leading from within, beyond the title, beyond any type of status, because that's what you've done. You realize that that's it, I am enough, I have my
Mm.
story to tell, this is why I live, this is my path, this is my impact. And uh, and and at the same time, there are so many CEOs with the title, with the privilege, I would call, because it is a privilege. When you have the title, you got the privilege to speak and to be heard, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when we
Mm-hmm.
know that we want to impact humanity and leave the footprint for the generations to come, we want our kids to grow up in a mostly
Mm.
nurtured, healthy environment. So the question would be, like, what would your be like what advice you would give, Neil, to CEOs who got the privilege with the title to be vulnerable enough, like to really step to make that step, like it's a brave step, right, to suddenly
Yeah.
within the organization maybe start talking. But what would be your advice for these males and females who got the title, and yeah, who would listen to the podcast and they would feel, triggered to do something about that? What could they do?
Yeah, look, I believe there is a misconception around how society views leadership, in that often power is associated with the word CEO, or the word CEO, or um, it's about, it's about sitting on top, and that's sort of language, right? And you see that with pays, right? I mean, most often the CEOs are paid the most in the company, right? Why? Because they hold the most pressure,
Yeah.
um, the most I guess they carry the mantle of the company. If the company goes down, who they're going to look at? They're going to fire the CEO, etc., etc. But I actually believe that there are two superpowers every great leader needs, and that is vulnerability and empathy. Now, it's interesting when you think about vulnerability, because vulnerability, if you think about it from this perspective, in the olden days, you had to wear armor, right? So armor was from the front and the back, and the term vulnerability actually is about going into battle without armor on. And so you're actually being willing to be vulnerable enough, which means that you're willing to put yourself out there enough, being honest, being real with people enough that they could actually fire abuse and hurt and all that sort of stuff at you. But you're willing to go in there because you want to create a culture where everyone can be themselves, everyone can be real. And the way I term it is, it's not so much armor, it's a mask. That I believe that if we were to lower the mask to be vulnerable enough as CEOs and as general managers, as leaders, that we are going to be creating a culture where every single person can be who they are. Because let's be honest, most people, most adult people live 80% of their life at a workplace. Now, if they can't be real in that environment, and they feel like they have to wear a mask all the time, then that's not going to be a safe environment. They're going to leave feeling disgruntled. They're going to keep jumping ship from different companies, trying to find a place where they can belong and be real. Now, the other angle of that is empathy. Empathy is not sympathy, right? Sympathy is going, I can understand what you're going through because I've lived your life. No, that's not right. You know, it's empathy. Empathy is actually recognizing that you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes, but you're willing to journey with them no matter who they are or what they've been through. I guess an example is probably if someone walks into your office, right? Let's say they walk into your office and you have a meeting to get to, like massively, but you've created this culture where people are willing to be vulnerable and you created this opportunity to be empathetic. I believe that leadership is made up of moments of critical decision making that can transform people's lives and your own journey as a CEO. And so when it comes to that moment where that woman walks in and she says, hey, I just really need to talk to you. I'm not doing very well. You have a critical moment right there, whether you outwork what you've been teaching them in empathy or whether you brush her off and say, I'll make a meeting in my diary or whatever it is. So it's those moments that actually matter. And I believe massively that when it comes to vulnerability and empathy, you're actually setting a precedent for people to be the same in that. And it takes the mantle to go, hang on a sec, oh, wow, the CEO is actually human? Like, that's amazing, you know? He doesn't have to have it all together. You know, there was a time recently where my team, I just said to them, look, I had a health concern, and I was told I needed to take some time off, and so I came to them and I said, look, you know, I just need you to know I'm going to have to take 4 to 6 weeks off, and it wasn't that I was worried about telling them, but I was so encouraged by their reaction because of the culture that I've been able to develop there, in that they said, look, we're going to be okay, Neil. Thanks so much for telling us about what's going on. We're going to be all right. Take your rest and come back stronger. And that's what I've done. And I think that's the thing, is that you create that environment and that vulnerability and empathy, and you create a culture that people don't want to leave.
It's epic. I loved every bit of that, and it's just so fascinating that the words you've said, that as a leader, as that entitled CEO, you don't have to have everything, gathered. You are a human, and I made this belief for myself always that a human is more than words and actions, and that's it's my choice in any moment um, to see a human beyond any type of words and actions, because we can't even know how much impact that neutral space, and loving space and empathy and vulnerability, how much impact it can do for any
Yeah,
human, because
yeah,
it gives us so much. We are evolving, right, within that type of atmosphere, and yeah, and people with whom we are gathered. Wonderful. So I'm going back to the world record question, Neil. So how is the world better off because you, with your like audacious choices, and your company organization is in it?
yeah. Look, I think that's such a good question, and I've wrestled with this over the weekend, and I spoke to my team to get their thoughts as well. And I think the thing is, often companies like us, or around the child protection and child maltreatment organizations, often they are focused more around the bottom of the cliff when people have been abused or when people have experienced that pain. And it's about, counseling and support for the families, the support for the survivors, those sort of things. Wouldn't it be amazing if kids didn't have to go through that and they didn't have to get abused and all that stuff? So we work at the top of the cliff, if you like. So we are about prevention. And so
Mm.
the world is better off because of us, because we are helping to give children a future through helping organizations understand the why they protect children and why they do what they do and why it's important to comply with law and those sort of things, so that children don't have to live a lifetime of abuse. And as far as it is with us, we use our tools and services that we've created to create safer environments in those organizations. So those kids, let's say they are going through that pain and that hurt in their own home, they can know that when they go to that church, when they go to that sporting club, or they go to that non-for-profit or that club, that they're safe there. There's safe people there and they are not going to harm them. And so we work in that space to help organizations understand that and protect children.
Mm. It's so good to be able to be anchored to the root causes, rather than kind of consequences, right? As you speak, because this is where, I assume if I would be a part of your team, I would feel so much energy every day to do our why, right, and to serve those who are
Yeah.
serving others. And now going back to the rituals, because I know that this is a nonprofit organization, right, Neil? And you have a lot of like there is a quite a big team and probably volunteers. Like, could you share with us how you guys like an ecosystem? How do you work? How do you
That's
interact?
such it's so funny. It's so funny you say that, because we look after. So we partner with organizations to create safer environments for 330,000 kids. Right. We have, drum roll please,
Wow.
3 full-time staff,
Oh my God, that's so
and we have 1 part-time staff member. We have
okay.
some contractors that we contract, and with one of our products, we look after over 34,000 people.
Wow.
Um, and we know we're punching way above our belt. We know that. But, with a non for profit harm prevention charity, social enterprise, you don't have a lot of cash, and unfortunately, a lot of it everything goes back into the business. So that's the reality of how it works. But we have a staff meetings each week. We encourage one another. We're always there supporting one another. We obviously see each other's diaries and things like that, how to support each other that way. One of my staff members, and I love this, celebrated 10 years, 10 years with us. Now that's awesome. And he's been through a lot way before I got there. He's been through a lot. He's helped build that company. And so we celebrated. We got him a voucher to go away with his wife. We, took him out for lunch, and we spent time together as a team. And like I said, we're a small team, but the reality is with advocacy, it's not about how small the team is, it's how big the impact is. And
Absolutely.
the reality is for us, I'm big on collaboration. So our mentality is partnering with other organizations in order to further a cause. And so I guess that's just how I'm wired. And so the company's kind of been shaped a little bit more about how I'm wired. I think that's what happens with CEO. They bring their energy, they bring their attitude, they bring their kind of ideas, and obviously making sure everyone has a voice, absolutely. But, you know, in terms of leadership, you're steering the ship. And so for me, my strengths are is that promotion and advocacy. And so that's, you know, around the trauma space and around the prevention space, that's where I speak into, because that's where I'm more of, I've got more expertise in that because of my own experience.
Yeah, and this is your zone of genius. And going back to knowing that the, the impact you guys want to create and the impact every child needs, right, in
Yeah.
Australia, and knowing that, yeah, I mean, there are always limited resources, but the resourcefulness you are anchored to, it's like really, really huge. Like, what type of rituals maybe helps you and your team, Neil, to kind of stay anchored to that big audacious impact? Meanwhile, you open up your bank account and you see what you see in terms of the cash flow. So, like, what helps you to,
Hmm.
continue to be at
Yeah,
that level of
absolutely.
energy and yeah. Mhm.
I mean, it comes back to it. It honestly comes back to we don't want to see a child harmed or abused, so we're going to do everything we can to do that. You know, I've built a culture in our organization where it's not about how much we work; it's about getting the job done, and that job's not finished. And we don't work our people into the ground at all. Nothing like that. We allow people to take the breaks they need to, take the leave they need to, go to the appointments they need to. And I think keeping it fresh like that, and also keeping them accountable for actually looking after themselves, and them keeping me accountable. They're probably better at it than I am, to be honest with you. Um, it like helps us to stay focused. And I think also bringing up the why, which I do all the time, like all the time, trauma based, because I do some speaking around Australia around this topic. You know, it keeps it front and center of what we're doing. I always try to bring back the conversation around prevention to around the impact of trauma, because that's what we're about. And because society is so focused on compliance that it becomes something that is like an annoying thing to do rather than a necessity of understanding why it is. The other thing as well is that, you know, you talk about bank account. There's been many times where we could have folded. That's the truth. You know, I mean, a lot of non-profits would say that, you know, but through blood, sweat, and tears, and maybe prayers as well, there has been, you know, lots of opportunities where you could fold, but then you come back to the cause of the why, you know. And so, you know, and the problem is that prevention is very hard to measure. How many kids do we know that we prevented harm and abuse of children just by an organization putting our tools and services in place and us supporting them, consulting with them, and those sort of things? You'll never know that
No,
ever, you
no,
know,
don't
unless you
even
started
try.
with the beginning of a company and moving, you know. And so it's difficult from that perspective. So we have to stay motivated, because we find it very hard to get donations and investors and those sort of things. We haven't got any investors, and donations, we've got very, very little to fund us, because people find it hard. They want to see measurable results. And so it's a difficult space to be in, but we keep moving forward because the children matter and our job's
Mm.
not done.
Wow, I can just, I listen to how you speak and I can really tune into your level of commitment and energy and belief. And I'm just thinking about something completely opposite, something, like I'm thinking about extreme, like a CEO sitting in a big corporate skyscraper, having all the privileges, right, and profitability in the like in the cash flow and in the in the P&L sheets and etc. But there's very seldom people at that corporations have the level of I don't know how to explain it now. English is not my first language, but feeling oneness, right? And being in the mission. And I believe that when you are in the mission or on the mission and you feel that within your body, you will figure everything out to make
Yep.
sure, right, that you are keeping yourself anchored to your purest essence of why, and you will knock on every possible doors, and you will out innovate and create and collaborate and find solutions. And this is where I feel that, yeah, in the big corporations, we are losing that because we are not, yeah, we just lost and drifted away from that purest why of why in the first place business was created. So anyone who is listening, the CEOs of big
Hmm.
corporations, they can literally learn so much from what you've just shared with us, Neil. And I have the last question, which is, if you could change one thing that could leverage and amplify your impact, I don't know how to measure that, but it doesn't matter, um, in a astounding ways, what would you change?
Mm. Yeah, look, that's a really great question, but I can answer that really, really simply. Um, I would, I would, I would want to show people that if you're willing to listen and to take the time to understand the why of the mission, you will act in a way that ensures the safety of all children. That you uphold, like you're talking to all these people in different countries, you uphold the UN rights of the child, the basic needs of a child to keep them safe. I mean, countries aren't doing that. And that's why we're seeing child sexual exploitation material produced in ridiculous amounts, and just taking the time to listen to this, the cause of and the impact, and let that sit with you for a moment. If you let that sit with you for a moment, that you don't want to see a child feel that, I really think it can change things. And then obviously having the backing financially to get it into marketplaces. The thing that frustrates me so much in the world is you don't hear of child sexual abuse, like you don't even talk about it on adverts or anything like that. There's no reality that 98% of people who are abused by someone that they know. They could be sitting next to them watching TV. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
you see vehicle adverts around crashes and those sort of things. So I would say, from a media perspective, like, I think it would be powerful to really see something like this in your face, to say, hey, we've got to understand, if a child is abused, it could be a life sentence. And anyway, I know that's a couple of extra things. I apologize, but
No,
that's something for me. I would love to see that, and I'm advocating for that.
mm, I'm listening to you, and just have 1 million of thoughts, like, where could I place this interview so everyone could hear this, not only the leaders but
Yeah,
parents as well, because I'm you know just literally thinking about my son. And when you mentioned that, like, to sit down and really listen to that type of mission, and I'm thinking, what's the relationship of mine with this statement? And then I realized that I don't do that. I don't,
yeah,
as a mother, I never even raised that question in my head, right, Neil? And that's already right. You are impacting my mind already to think differently, and to maybe to look or to talk with my son, and ask some other type of questions and help him to understand what an abuse might look like, right? So he can
yeah. That's right.
distinguish,
Yeah,
and as well, listening to your story, I mean, you've given me so much. Probably
Yeah.
none of MBAs and whatever I accomplished given me that level of understanding. So thank you so much for being you, for making your audacious choices to be the voice of your not only your story, because your story is a story of million of kids, I believe, all over the world. So it's
Absolutely.
just so
Yeah.
wonderful that you are unfolding this so gracefully. So thank you so much for being with us, Neil.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm super grateful and privileged to be part of this.
Thank you. Bye, guys.